Hello, this is Dr. Maples, and I'm coming to you live from Carol's Candles and the Stockton Therapy Network. I'm glad that you joined me today. Today, I'm going to talk about childhood and anxiety. Um, Part of the reason why I'm talking about this is yesterday, my son asked me um, how to handle anxiety. He was having a little bit of anxiety issues as it related to whether or not he finished his homework and he finished the right pages. He's in fourth grade, and as we know, when you go to school, there could be a lot of pressures put on you as it relates to having finished things and having finished things correctly. And so, one of the things that he always threats about at night is whether or not he finished his homework, if he finished his homework correctly, if he finished his homework, the right pages of it. Part of this is because he doesn't want to be in trouble at school. And then there's also an underlying fear, I think, about how parents will react as it relates to him as it relates to if he got in trouble in school. And so some of the things that we talked about last night was ways that we could begin to control anxiety. But in order to first understand that, we also have to understand what is the root of anxiety and where it comes from. Anxiety is the first emotion that we're really ever exposed to. If you remember parenting your children as infants, when they became uncomfortable, they cried. And that's really where the root of anxiety comes from. It's this feeding or needing to be changed response. There's a level of discomfort that happens in the body. And we first learn to recognize that as being an antithesis of being comfortable or feeling that we can move feeling that we have some level of comfort. And so, normally with babies, the first comfort discomfort response is literally whether or not they're hungry or not, whether or not they've been changed or not. And so, as it relates to anxiety, this progresses as children enter toddlerhood and they're first faced with the working definition parents give children as it relates to anxiety, and that's to fear objects. If a child darts out in the middle of a street, a parent naturally yells because they want to save their child from oncoming traffic or oncoming danger. And so children are very susceptible and very adaptive to understand their parents' emotions, especially as it relates to fears and anxieties that we may have. And so as this progresses, we as parents literally instill fear into our children to help keep them safe. And this level of discomfort that's there eventually becomes the anxiety that they have to deal with later in life. And so from there, what happens in early grade school is childhood thought processes begin to transition. They're able to begin to identify things from dualistic perspectives. That could be the idea of there's rules that could be broken. There's good behavior, there's bad behavior, there's boys, there's girls, there is a whole bunch of different things by which they have to begin to judge their external environment. And part of this links quite successfully to the lessons that we as parents initially instill into our children, which is to fear certain objects and to embrace other objects. And so, from a psychological perspective, what happens as children develop through age, they eventually move on towards finding different things that they end up becoming nervous about. And so the initial things that we taught, such as to fear moving objects that are like an 18-wheel object coming at you at 35 miles per hour, that begins to transition to fearing the grade. They don't want to stand out from their classmates. A lot of individuals want to strive to better themselves and to be successful in what they're doing. And so they begin to learn how to fear the F or fear ostracization in the classroom or to not have an answer correct. And this fear becomes where anxiety can begin to get out of control, especially as it relates to the development of obsessive compulsive indices. And so part of the thing that I was looking at with my son last night and trying to help him how to control his anxiety was to look at different exercises he could engage in to assist in his journey to understand and to overcome the obstacles that are getting in his way. Anxiety is just that. It's a symptom. It's not necessarily a disorder per se unless it begins to get in the way of your everyday life. The ways that you begin to mitigate anxiety as an emotion or a symptom is you learn ways to begin to control it. And so, anxiety within itself is important because it literally, A, helps keep you alive. The problem that occurs as we begin to transition initial anxieties that keep us safe as a drive to anxiety about general daily situations really tends to get in our way of social, academic, or familial functioning. And this is where anxiety can become problematic. And so, what we have to do thought processes or think to engage in things that help us to overcome anxiety. And so some of the things that I told him, I said, well, if you're worried about your homework being a problem and that you didn't finish your homework, then what you can do is you can begin to make a list of what pages that you did do. You could write it on your hand to see that, okay, I did this page, I did this page, I did this page. And so then he ended up bringing up, well, I already have a homework book that I keep all my assignments in. Maybe I could just check mark which ones are done and then carry that with me at night so I could double check, make sure that it was in fact completed, and therefore I'm able to begin to combat the anxiety as a means to ease the transition into sleep and to end the day on a positive note. And so he was able to take a systems perspective from this, which I was able to help introduce him to, because really the only way that we begin to control anxiety and to teach ways to control this emotion is really from developing a system that helps them to mitigate its effects. And so if he was worried about not finishing the right page, well, he'll know if he puts a check by that page that he looked at it. Okay, so that is complete, and I could believe that. And I have some objective proof, not just what's going on in my head, which, as we all know, the head can be the source of multiple fears, anxieties, and other emotions. And so it's important to note that anxiety is within itself fear. It's an emotion and it has its place as it relates to helping us to survive. And from there, it that's the positive aspect of it. It also has a negative aspect when it begins to be we call it projected upon things that don't necessarily have a life or death consequence. Take for school, for example, as I've talked about in this segment. As it relates to school, it can be a anxiety provoking event, especially as it relates to continuously being judged for one's positive or negative behaviors, one's positive or negative outcomes on grades, one positive or negative outcomes on assignments that are turned in. And we begin to fear things that necessarily may not need to be feared because anxiety really is one of those it drives the fight or flight response. And within itself, it also helps individuals not only to survive, but also to take a look at what's there and make effective changes in their life. And so from my son's perspective, he was fighting with anxiety about did he do the right assignments. And so, if he's able to develop a system by which to have checks and balances, now he could begin to successfully mitigate that anxiety and he could let it go as a means to relax during the day. Anxiety really does nothing for us but to help us survive. And so, as it relates to working with your children, your first step as a parent, especially in practical parenting, is to help them to effectively identify and to effectively integrate their emotions. And so I put anxiety on the pinky finger, and basically the reason I did that because it's one of the first emotions that children really begin to take on and learn from as a means to successfully navigate into adult life. However, we need to help them not only to identify times when it arises, but also to learn specific coping mechanisms to. I'll take that back. I don't like the word coping mechanisms because it sounds like life is something you just have to cope with. We need to teach them successful behaviors to adapt to adapt to their emotions. With this, they're able to successfully navigate their emotions as a means to harness the energy to develop in a successful manner and to advance confidently in the direction of their dreams. Our growth as parents are intimately linked with our children's growth. And so as I get ready to sign off, just food for thought for until next time. I'm going to do this post again next week and we'll explore a secondary emotion, which would be anger. Until next time, I just ask you, have you ever has your kids ever expressed anxiety to you? And if so, how have you helped them manage it? I look forward to your responses, and I definitely would like to share those on video as this practical parenting journey moves along. I thank you for your time, and I wish you all to advance confidently in the direction of your dreams. Thank you.